Put your phone down, close your eyes, listen to the story, and picture it yourself. It was almost midnight when Daniel left home. The town behind him was already asleep. Streetlights passed slowly across the windshield, one after another, illuminating the inside of the car for a brief second before disappearing behind him. His house had become a small collection of lights in the rearview mirror. Then even those disappeared. Ahead of him was nothing but road, a black ribbon stretching into the distance. He could barely see where it ended, but he knew where it was going. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., Daniel was supposed to walk through the doors of a building in the city and sit down for the biggest opportunity of his life. He had spent years imagining that moment. He had imagined the room, the people waiting for him, the handshake, the questions, the moment when he would finally get the chance to prove that all the years of work had meant something. He had told himself that if the opportunity ever came, he wouldn't hesitate. He would be ready. But now that it was here, he wasn't so sure. Daniel reached over and turned the music down. The engine hummed beneath him. The tires whispered against the road. For a while, there was nothing else. Then he heard it. A voice. Quiet. Almost too quiet to notice. "You're not ready." Daniel's eyes flicked toward the rearview mirror. For a moment, he expected to see someone sitting behind him. But there was nothing. Just the empty back seat. A jacket he'd thrown back there earlier. An old water bottle rolling slightly with every turn. Nothing unusual. Daniel looked back at the road. He smiled to himself. He was tired. That was all. He had been thinking about tomorrow for weeks. Of course, his mind was playing tricks on him. He pressed his foot down slightly harder. The car moved faster. The road opened up ahead. And for a few minutes, the voice disappeared. Then it came back. "You're going to fail." Daniel's jaw tightened. He stared straight ahead. The darkness seemed deeper now. He tried to think about something else. He thought about the people who had encouraged him. His family. His friends. Everyone who had told him he was ready. Everyone who had told him he deserved this chance. But another thought followed immediately. What if they're wrong? Daniel swallowed. What if he wasn't ready? What if he had mistaken hard work for talent? What if everyone else had seen something in him that wasn't really there? The voice whispered again. "They're going to see right through you." Daniel turned the radio up. Music filled the car. He let it play loudly enough to drown everything else out. He stared through the windshield. The headlights illuminated a few dozen meters of road at a time. Beyond that was darkness. He couldn't see what was coming. He could only see enough road to take the next few seconds. And maybe that was why the voice bothered him so much. Because he didn't know what was waiting ahead. None of us do. We drive through life with headlights that only show us a little way forward. We want to see the whole road. We want to know where it leads. We want to know whether we'll succeed before we take the first step. But the road never gives us that answer. It simply keeps appearing beneath us, 1 meter at a time, one decision at a time, one moment at a time. Daniel kept driving. 20 minutes passed, then 30. The town was long gone now. There were no houses, no shops, no streetlights, just trees standing on either side of the road. Their branches reached toward the sky like black silhouettes. The moon was hidden behind clouds. The only light came from his headlights. And somewhere in the back seat, the voice was still there. "You could turn around." Daniel said nothing. "You still have time." His fingers tightened around the steering wheel. "Just go home." Daniel breathed in slowly. He tried to ignore it, but the voice knew exactly what to say. "You don't have to embarrass yourself tomorrow." You don't have to find out you're not good enough. You could stay where you're comfortable. Daniel's eyes began to burn. Because that last sentence was different. Stay where you're comfortable. There was something comforting about it. No risk. No judgment. No possibility of failure. He could go home. He could crawl into bed. He could wake up tomorrow and tell himself that the opportunity wasn't right, that the timing wasn't right, that he needed more preparation, more experience, more confidence. Maybe he could try again next year. The voice softened. There's always next time. Daniel's foot slowly lifted from the accelerator. The car began to slow. He stared at the road ahead. A sign appeared in the distance. City. 68 kilometers. He had come this far. 68 kilometers. That was all. But suddenly it felt like 68,000. His breathing became shallow. His heart began beating faster. He imagined tomorrow. He saw himself walking through those doors. He imagined someone asking him a question he couldn't answer. He imagined the silence afterward. He imagined the look on their faces. He imagined walking back to his car, knowing that he wasn't good enough. His stomach twisted. The voice whispered, "Turn around." Daniel looked at the rearview mirror. The empty back seat stared back at him. He looked forward again, then back at the mirror. Something about that empty seat bothered him. He couldn't explain why. The voice continued, "You know this isn't for you." Daniel reached for the indicator. His hand hovered over it. For several seconds, he didn't move. Then, click, the indicator came on. Daniel turned the steering wheel. The car crossed into the opposite lane. He was going home. The voice became silent. And somehow, that silence hurt more than the words. Daniel drove back toward the town. The road he had traveled only moments earlier now looked completely different. The same trees. The same darkness. The same white lines disappearing beneath the headlights. But he wasn't traveling towards something anymore. He was running away from it. And he knew it. He pulled into a small roadside rest area. There were no other cars. No people. Just an old wooden bench beneath a tree and a single yellow light buzzing above it. Daniel turned the engine off. The car fell silent. He sat there in the darkness, hands resting on the steering wheel. He could hear his own breathing. For the first time all night, there was no voice, just silence. Daniel looked at the clock. 1:16 a.m. He had wasted more than an hour. He closed his eyes. And then he asked himself a question. Not the question the voice had been asking. A different one. What am I actually afraid of? He waited. The answer came slowly. He wasn't afraid of the opportunity. He was afraid of discovering that he wasn't good enough. He wasn't afraid of failing. He was afraid of what failure would mean about him. He wasn't afraid of the road. He was afraid of not knowing where the road would lead. Daniel opened his eyes. He looked into the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty. Completely empty. He stared at it. Then something clicked. The voice had been with him for more than an hour. It had told him what to do. It had told him what would happen. It had told him who he was. But it had never touched him. It had never reached forward. It had never grabbed the steering wheel. It had never pressed the brake. It had never changed the gears. It had never turned the car around. Daniel looked down at his hands. His hands had done that. He looked at his feet. His feet had done that. He looked at the road behind him. And suddenly, the truth became impossible to ignore. The voice had never been driving. Daniel sat there for a long time, thinking about all the times he'd heard that same voice throughout his life. Maybe not literally, maybe not as a sound, but as a thought, a feeling, a hesitation, a little sentence that appeared whenever something mattered. You're not ready. You're going to fail. Someone else is better. Don't embarrass yourself. Wait until you're more confident. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe next year. He remembered opportunities he had walked away from. Things he had wanted to try. Things he had started and abandoned. People he had wanted to become. And he wondered how many times he had mistaken fear for wisdom. How many times he had assumed that because something felt frightening, it must have been the wrong decision. Daniel looked through the windshield. The road was still there, waiting. He didn't suddenly feel confident. That was the strange part. Nothing magical happened. His doubts didn't disappear. His fear didn't vanish. He still had no guarantee that tomorrow would go well. He could still fail. He could still walk into that building and discover that he wasn't ready. But for the first time, Daniel understood something. Being afraid didn't mean he had to turn around. He started the engine. The headlights came alive. The road appeared again. Daniel pulled out of the rest area, and this time, he drove toward the city. The voice returned almost immediately. You're not ready. Daniel kept his eyes on the road. You're going to fail. He kept driving. Turn around. Daniel took a slow breath. And for the first time, he answered. Maybe. The voice went quiet. Daniel smiled. Because maybe he would fail. Maybe tomorrow wouldn't go the way he wanted. Maybe he would make mistakes. Maybe someone else would be better. Maybe he would walk out of that building disappointed. But none of that had happened yet. It was only a possibility. A story his mind had created about a future that didn't exist. And Daniel realized that he had been allowing a possibility to make decisions for him. He kept driving. The kilometers began to disappear. 68. 69. 70. 71. The sky slowly began to change. The darkness above the trees softened. A faint grey line appeared along the horizon. Then blue. Then a little gold. Morning was coming. Daniel watched the first sunlight spill across the road. The trees that had looked frightening in the darkness were just trees. The road that had seemed endless now had an end. And the voice was still there. But it sounded different now. Smaller. Not because it had disappeared. Because Daniel had stopped treating it like an authority. He understood something that morning. You don't have to defeat every doubt before you move. You don't have to feel confident before you begin. You don't have to silence every fearful thought. Sometimes you simply have to let the voice talk while you keep your hands on the wheel. Because your mind can tell you that you're not ready. It can tell you that you're going to fail. It can remind you of every mistake you've ever made. It can show you every possible way things could go wrong. But your mind does not get to decide where you go. You do. The voice can sit in the back seat. It can complain. It can criticize. It can scream. It can beg you to turn around. But it cannot drive unless you give it the keys. So when the voice tells you that you aren't ready, keep driving. When it tells you that you're going to fail, keep driving. When it tells you that someone else is better, keep driving. When it tells you to wait for another day, keep driving. You don't need to know exactly where the road ends. You don't need to know whether you'll succeed. You don't even need to know if you're completely ready. You only need to be willing to take the next kilometer. Then the next. Then the next. Because eventually, you may look back and realize something. The thing you were afraid of was never actually holding you back. You were. And the moment you stopped listening, the road opened up. Daniel finally reached the city just after sunrise. He parked outside the building. For a moment, he didn't get out. He simply sat there. The engine was off. The morning was quiet. He looked into the rearview mirror one last time. The back seat was empty. Daniel smiled. Then he opened the door, stepped out, and walked forward. The voice followed him. Of course it did. It always would. But this time, he didn't turn around.